Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. Fallout, the RPG series where you can pretend to be a rugged wastelander up until the point where Bethesda backhands you with its god-awful quality control and money-shilling cash grabs. Now, believe it or not, but I actually haven't played any of the Fallout games since New Vegas. Mostly because I felt so betrayed by the fact that the NCR was trying to revive the concept of taxes that I joined up with Kaisar's Legion and rediscovered the true meaning of based. That is, before eventually siding with Father Elijah to kill everyone because I found out how damn cringe the faction fanboys are. Speaking of cringe, did you all know that there's a Fallout tabletop RPG? Because no one f***ing told me. Today's story stars a poor DM who desperately wants to recreate the Fallout experience, and their players who quickly learn that in order to have a Fallout-inspired adventure, you need to leave the vault. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPGHorrorStories. Enjoy. This week's story comes to us from user Sir Retford III, and is titled, "Ever have a game that went too well? I did, and now my players are upset with me." I recently bought the Fallout tabletop RPG, and was excited to play it with my friends. Let's call them Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo. We all set on a time and place to host a Session 0 as the game uses different rules and mechanics than what we are used to with D&D 5e. I also discovered that, aside from Charlie who tried Fallout 4 years ago, most of my friends had never actually played a Fallout game and only understood the setting through cultural osmosis. This meant, on top of explaining how to play, that I was also going to be my friend's official introduction to the world of Fallout. With that all in mind, I cobbled together a setting and a story. I decided that I'd have my players start all as Vault Dwellers, to give a matching character and player surprise to discovering the wasteland. And what would Fallout be without its vaults, and Vault-Tech's many, many horrific experiments inside said vaults? Of course, I could start my friends in a control vault, but where's the fun in that? After a lot of brainstorming, I decided that this particular vault's experiment would be twofold. First, homosexuality was not only accepted and encouraged inside of the vault, but heterosexuality was outright illegal and punishable by prison or even death for repeat offenders. This social shift would be rationalized by the absolute need to control population, as not to overexhaust resources, and all children were born through in vitro fertilization. Except that is only the setup for the experiment. In truth, Vault-Tech had robots tucked away that were secretly manipulating the genetic codes of the dwellers' eggs and sperm to see how far a human genome could be pushed and still remain viable. This would be the reasons that the players would have maxed out stats, weird quirks like green hair, or just be ungodly ugly. To get my players out into the wastelands, I planned two possible events based on how Session 0 would go. If my players wanted to have a more lighthearted beer and chips kind of game, a highly popular performer would suddenly escape from the vault in the middle of the night, and the players would be selected to go out and rescue/return said performer. If they were up for a more gritty Mad Max sort of game, the vault would be rated a la Fallout 2, with only them having survived or escaped. Session 0 finally rolls around, and we start testing out the rules, building characters, filling roles in the vault, and explaining the story, themes, and concepts. Before I go further, a bit of necessary introduction for my friends. As I mentioned earlier, my friends and I played 5e off and on before, so we were by no means strangers to tabletop RPGs or role-playing as a whole. Out of the three pillars of 5e, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie enjoy an equal balance, like myself with a favoritism for role-playing. Delta and Echo lean hard into favoring roleplay above combat and exploration, but they're okay with them on occasion. My friends also prefer open sandbox games over modules or linear stories, as they don't enjoy feeling like they are forced to do things that their characters would not do. For example, they don't like random combat encounters when playing 5e, as they feel like they are being forced to fight something and would rather have made the decision to engage the enemy by themselves. Now, with all that in mind, I explained that they will eventually need to leave the vault for one reason or another to enter into the wastelands, and about how the Fallout wastelands are filled with starving beasts, insane raiders, and other dangers. So while I can limit the combat and random fights, they will still be inevitable, to which they all said that they were okay with it. Next, I asked them if they want a more laid-back kind of game, or a game with a more hardcore setting. They didn't hesitate to go for the former. Lastly, I explained life inside of the vault, how their lives generally went, the struggles and problems that their characters were used to, as well as the atmosphere inside of the vault. Out of the 6 of us, Alpha, Bravo, and myself are straight, Charlie is bi, and Delta and Echo are gay. They are also willing to be open about their sexuality and sexual history once they get to know you. The vault life setting presented to them definitely surprised the two, since I'm the most prudish out of all of our lot. But they were more than happy to get started, especially Delta and Echo. I'll admit, once Session 0 was over, I was curious as to how they would react to a world like the one I described. Would Alpha and Bravo rebel against being punished for who their characters loved or how they normally lived? Would Charlie, Delta, and Echo stand against the punishment of any straight characters and NPCs? Or would they reflect the prejudice that they receive in real life? Would they bring the Vault's prejudice with them into the Wastelands? Once Session 0 officially started, my friends immediately took to Vault life. Alpha was a doctor, Bravo was a chef, Charlie became a maintenance technician, Delta a performer, and Echo was in security. Everyone was given chance to play with skill tests, action points, and the 2d20 system. As we are all adults, I was open to letting them have as much fun with flings, one-night stands, and whatever else they wanted to get up to inside of the steel tomb of the vault. While I never allowed any actual ERP, as role-playing every encounter would have to take all day, Charlie, Delta, and Echo were excited to freely be open about their characters' love and sex lives as they wanted. And Alpha and Bravo were more than happy playing out their lesbian fantasies. At the end of the session, the atmosphere of the vault had become of a free love society, so long as it wasn't between a man and a woman and didn't interfere with vault work. And while I did have Echo and Charlie stumble across 2 breeders exchanging kisses once, they simply decided to look the other way. I ended the session by having the Vault's star performer give one last grand concert in front of the entire vault. Needless to say, everyone was super hyped for Session 2. After 2 weeks of impromptu one-on-ones about characters, text chats, about in-game events, and a surprising amount of out-of-game character building, Session 2 began. Side note, I have never gotten my friends this invested into their characters before, so I was absolutely pumped. As the players wake up in beds not their own and are fighting off hangovers from the after-concert party, they discover the entire vault is abuzz as the star performer has gone missing, and it's even rumored that they went outside of the vault. But how can that be? Where would they go? The vault's been closed and sealed for hundreds of years, so how did they even get out? After talking amongst heartbroken fans and confused friends about the situation, the Overseer announces that the performer did indeed leave the vault, and that the Overseer was going to choose a select group of individuals through lottery to form a rescue party. And you can guess which lucky 5 individuals were selected. And here is where everything began to go sideways. All of my friends said, no. I was thrown for a loop, scrambling to get things on track. I had the Overseer implore to them the importance of morale inside the vault, the necessary service that the performer was doing for the vault, how it was their duty to help in a time of crisis, blah blah blah. Again they said, no. Each of my friends gave in-character reasons as to why they didn't want to leave. Alright then, player agency and all that. If they didn't want to leave, they didn't have to leave. Willingly. On to plan B. So this is actually a pretty tough situation that OP has gotten themselves in here. You're all familiar with the hero's journey, right? A lot of stories, including most of the narratives spun by DMs, follow it pretty closely. Okay, so let's say we got our cute little car here that's gonna take us on our hero's road trip. The first step of our road trip is the call to adventure. Okay, great, we got our star performer going missing, and the players are asked to investigate the potential threat and rescue the performer. Great. The next step is refusal of the call, which is definitely being performed flawlessly by our players here. But here is where our little car gets a flat tire and our road trip grinds to a halt because our players refuse to move on past this step. From here, either one of two things can happen. Either we say, guess the story's over, and we put the car in park and decide that's where our road trip ends, or a trucker high on ketamine driving a massive semi-truck called The Plot plows into our little car, killing everyone inside. Drake, isn't that just railroading? Shut up. Shut up. Shut the f*** up. In RPGs, the world is alive and filled with characters and external conflicts that will find the players, whether they really want it to or not. If you're on a camping trip and an 800-pound grizzly is charging right at you, and you say, "Nah, this patch of grass is pretty comfy. I don't really feel like moving." Nobody is going to be whining about railroading when you get mauled to death, because they're going to be too busy talking about what an idiot you are for ignoring the fucking bear. The rest of Session 2, the Vault was completely depressed. Work wasn't getting done. People would argue and rage at each other for the slightest irritation. Some had to literally be dragged out of their rooms in order to perform their daily duties. They could hear the performer's songs on loop behind closed doors. Posters of the performer around were either turned into funeral memorials or completely vandalized. The players themselves were looked down on. How could they abandon the performer? How could they be so selfish? Didn't they care about the performer? Etc., etc. Needless to say, my friends weren't all too happy with me by the end of Session 2, especially Delta and Echo. They all felt like I was unfairly punishing them for the actions that they chose, and that they shouldn't be bullied into playing a way that they didn't want to. I explained that they were all right, and that I was being harsh on them, but it was the consequence of their choice. The Overseer told them how important the performer was, so they were also aware of the fact through various pictures, NPC chatter, and the giant concert at the end of Session 1 just how important the performer was to the Vault. And since they had chosen not to leave the safety of the Vault, their fellow Vault Dwellers viewed their characters as having openly abandoned the Vault Star. I also reminded them that back in Session 0, I explained to them that the plan was for them to leave the Vault, and that they all agreed and that they were okay with that. Begrudgingly, they agreed to turn back time and go after the performer. Nope. They made their decision, and I said that I was going to respect their choice in Session 3, if they would just give me a chance, and if they even still wanted to play, to which they all reluctantly agreed. Session 3. It's been several days since the performer left. The Overseer ended up sending out a different team. Life was returning to the Vault slowly. Delta and other smaller performers within the Vault tried to pick up the slack of the Star or even take their place, but they struggled to be accepted as a replacement. Half the Vault was in a deep depression. Charlie had to pick up the slack of their fellow workers, as they didn't see much of a point in continuing without the performer. And the Overseer themselves gave a mandate to Echo to lock up any and all weapons, chems, and alcohol to prevent even more problems. Again, there was almost no sex for the players. There were a few conflicts to solve and a few skill checks to make, but there was very little RP from my players, making the session very boring for everyone. This caused some of my friends to say that they didn't want to play since they weren't having fun anymore. I pleaded with them to give it one more session. I promised that it was going to be much more interesting in the next session. Session 4. A few more days had passed and people had moved on. My players are finally getting their groove on again, with all the other residents as well. Although there are still a few who outright refuse them because of their decisions not to leave. My players finally begin to start perking back up and getting into their roles again. The only odd thing to happen in the day was Charlie suddenly discovering a random encrypted file on their Pip-Boy that wasn't there yesterday, to which they failed their 5 difficulty check to hack it open. After another few hours of play and a few more in-game days, everyone is back to where they were in Session 1. Until that is, they hear a loud grinding noise coming from the vault door. Then blam! The vault door explodes off its roller and the vault suddenly becomes a wash of bullets, blood, and death as crazed humans in tribal-like armor pour into the vault, heralded by a hulking suit of black power armor, wielding a minigun. I give the players one objective: escape alive. Remember how I said my friends, especially Delta and Echo, were upset about being called out for not voluntarily leaving the vault in Session 2? Woo boy, were those two absolutely livid. I had betrayed their trust. They had gotten attached to their characters and the vault, and I was just burning it all because I didn't like them having fun. I was killing their characters because I was spiteful. I was ruining a place that they could be happy. I was bullying them into playing a certain way against their will. I was a terrible GM. I was a terrible friend. It went on and on and on. Nothing I said reached them. All arguing was drowned out with angry shouts and slurs about me being a homophobe. I had never seen my friends that legitimately angry at me before. Even Alpha and Bravo, who were just as miffed about what just happened, were completely taken aback by the outburst. Charlie ducked their head and got out of the crossfire. It's been a few weeks, and while I'm on speaking term with all of my friends again, Delta and Echo refuse to play another tabletop RPG with me ever again. Looking back, I do see why Delta and Echo were angry. I had unintentionally made a safe space for them to be open, appreciated, and accepted, where they could be as much themselves as they wanted to be, and could be. It wasn't that they didn't want to venture into the wasteland, it was that they didn't want to leave the place that they felt the most comfortable. But on the other hand, we had all agreed to play a certain game, and my players had decided, without me, that they wanted to play something else. While it was their decision to stay in the vaults, a decision I upheld, there was also no game or story if they stayed. To me, it was like if your 5th edition group suddenly said that they wanted to be blacksmiths and refused to go adventuring, but still expected you to be the DM to run a compelling, story-driven campaign. I also wasn't okay with all the endless flirting with my friends until they either all felt satisfied or got bored. Was I in the wrong for having raiders attack the vault after my friends were opposed to leaving on their own in Session 2? Or is it okay for me to feel like my friends blew the game's events way out of proportion? I mean, we're still friends, but it just hurts to see someone that you know and care about get so angry at you. End of story. Well, this is definitely a complicated one. A lot like in real life, conflicts like these are shades of gray, and viewing them in black and white isn't really constructive in any way, shape, or form. So, OP, are you at fault? Yes and no. We could start off by saying that you're definitely not homophobic. OP is at fault because they insisted on continuing their game as if there was nothing wrong when it was pretty obvious that the ship that both them and their players were on was in the process of sinking. I definitely see both sides here, but if I had to choose who is the bigger problem, I would definitely say it's more the players. Overall, what we have here is a failure to communicate. If it were me, the time to drop everything and talk to my players would have been the first no. Does it break immersion? Probably. Does it save campaigns? Absolutely. The DM is a player, and 100% deserves to have fun as well. Believe it or not, most people actually want their friends to have fun while playing RPGs too. But it's not a feasible expectation for that to happen if you don't communicate your desires with one another. But then again, that's how you would be able to prevent most RPG horror stories. And that's never gonna happen. After all, cringe. Cringe never changes. Now before we go, let's take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art comes from viewer Ice Puppy and depicts my visceral reaction to what was referred to as only the cantaloupe incident in this video here. Hey man, want some cantaloupe? What the f is that? It's a cantaloupe, dude. I don't see why Do you have any idea what people on the internet can do with one of those? Thank you again, Ice Puppy, for submitting your art. If you want to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email featured in my About section. I love that so many artists have submitted their artwork to the channel, and I'm so grateful that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon link is in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.